Handbook of Violence Against Women, Rights and Resources in Asturias. This handbook is aimed at providing information about violence against women as well as presenting the different resources for protection that are available in Asturias. Gender-based violence is a social problem that affects women regardless of where they are from or what social class they belong to, and it is one of the most obvious manifestations of inequality between men and women. Any act of gender-based violence that results in, or is likely to result in, physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, United Nations General Assembly, 1993. Types of violence against women. Although we normally associate violence against women to physical violence, it has different manifestations. Gender-based violence. Violence against women perpetrated by their partners or ex-partners. It can be physical violence, all actions that cause or can cause physical damage or injuries on women, including the use of physical violence or objects that threaten physical integrity. Psychological violence, threats, name-calling, belittlement. All these generate feelings of guilt and helplessness in the victim. Sexual violence, any sexual act or expression carried out against the woman's will, as well as the pressure to maintain non-consensual sexual acts. Economic violence, control and or deprivation of economic resources and property by men in order to diminish women's independence. Social violence, it involves depriving women of contact with their family and other people who are close to them in order to isolate them. This is made worse if they don't speak the language of the country where they are living. Spiritual violence, destruction of women's cultural or religious beliefs through punishment, scorn, or the imposition of a belief system that is not their own. Environmental violence, any conscious act that causes or can cause damage to the surroundings in order to intimidate the victim. Noises, punching furniture, slamming doors. Vicarious violence, violence against daughters and sons in order to hurt the mother. Everybody deserves to live a dignified, safe, and violent-free life. The cycle of gender-based violence, the cycle of violence against women. 1. Cumulative stress. The first signs of verbal, psychological, and even physical violence appear normally in isolated incidents. 2. Explosion. Violence explodes and physical, psychological, and sexual abuse take place. It is usually at this stage that women ask for help. 3. Remorse or honeymoon stage. Unless the abuse causes a breakup, there is a period of reconciliation or honeymoon in which aggressors, using strategies of emotional manipulation, are able to retain women. 4. Calm stage. In this stage, what happened seems to be in the past. However, it is giving way to the first stage. Any excuse will do to start the cycle again. The cycle is more intense each time it starts over. The remorse stage tends to disappear, and the abuse is more and more frequent and can cause permanent injuries or end in murder. The sooner we identify if we are in this situation and ask for help, the closer we are to ending our suffering. No one has the right to abuse another person. Violence against children and teenagers includes physical, sexual, and emotional violence, as well as neglect, isolation, disruption of education, and exploitation. Violence against children and teenagers can take place at home and within the community. It can be perpetrated by family members, caregivers, peers, or strangers. It is a crime. Bullying. Immigrant children and teenagers, or those who belong to immigrant families, can be bullied in the educational institution due to the color of their skin, language, traditions, etc. All educational institutions should have a protocol against bullying. Problems suffered by immigrant women that prevent them from escaping violence. Not knowing the rights or the law, lack of information. Not knowing the language, feeling isolated or lonely, lack of information, problems to access resources and to ask for help. Not trusting the authorities, fear that the administrative situation will worsen. Sometimes the abuser and his family or friends try to manipulate by telling them that if they report the abuse, they will be deported. Economic or administrative dependence on their abuser. Feeling guilty for reporting, thinking that it may harm their administrative situation. It is also common to receive such a threat by family and friends, even though the abuser is the only one who is responsible for the situation. Culture and traditions. Fear that her family and community will turn their back on her. Lack of a support network. Fear of having nowhere to go with her children. If you are a victim of violence and you don't know what to do, go to the nearest health center. Specific rights of victims of gender-based violence. The Organic Law on Integral Protection Measures Against Gender-Based Violence recognizes the rights of women victims: right to information, comprehensive social assistance and free legal aid, economic rights, labor rights, and social security benefits. All immigrant women, regardless of their legal status, are covered by the law against gender-based violence. Non-European Union foreign women may be holders of one of the two following types of residence and work permits if they are victims of gender-based violence. Independent residence and work permits for foreign women regrouped with their spouse or partners. The temporary residence and work permits held by a foreign woman will be renewed upon expiration in the event of termination of the employment contract or suspension of the employment relationship as a consequence of being a victim of gender-based violence. Foreign women in an irregular situation who are victims of gender-based violence have the following protection. If upon reporting the situation of gender-based violence, the irregular situation of the woman is revealed, no administrative sanctions will be carried out for living in Spain without a residence permit or authorization. Once the criminal process is over with the result of a conviction, the foreign woman will be granted a temporary residence and work permit, and if applicable, the requested permits for her minor or disabled children. Right to internal protection, right to asylum, right to subsidiary protection. Female genital mutilation, FGM. Female genital mutilation refers to all procedures involving partial or total removal of the female external genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. It is most often carried out on young girls between infancy and age 15. In every form in which it is practiced, female genital mutilation is a violation of girls' and women's fundamental human rights, including the rights to health, security, and dignity. UNICEF. Types. Type 1. Clitoridectomy. Clitoral hood or prepuce. Partial removal of clitoral prepuce. Clitoral hood or prepuce. Total removal of clitoral hood. Type 2. Excision. Clitoral hood or prepuce. Inner labia. Inner labia. Type 3. Infibulation. Type 4. Other procedures. Short-term consequences. Hemorrhages, mild or severe, which may cause anemia. Hemorrhagic shock. Hypovolemic if there is significant bleeding, or septic due to dissemination of the infection of the injured tissues. Urinary complications. Urinary tract infections. Acute urinary retention, injury to the urinary meatus due to the proximity of the cut, tissue injuries, injuries due to the performance of FGM or secondary to inflammation or infection of the area, fractures due to the resistance of the girls during the intervention, infections caused by the cut itself or by the involvement of adjacent tissues, abscesses or even sepsis. Excessive immune response to infection can occur and can be the cause of death. Due to the utensils used, sometimes infections such as tetanus or infectious diseases such as HIV, HPV, or HCC can be contracted. Severe and chronic pain, sepsis, problems or delayed healing, traumatic stress, fear, anxiety, death. Long-term consequences. Genitourinary, repeated urinary tract infections, painful urination, urinary incontinence, chronic general and genital infections, menstrual problems, dysmenorrhea, irregular menstruation, difficulty in the passage of menstrual blood, vaginal itching, chronic pain in the genital tissue, vaginal discharge due to infections, hematocolpus, salpingitis, pelvic inflammation, renal failure. Sexual, introito-vaginal stenosis, dyspareunia, decreased sexual satisfaction, reduced sexual desire and arousal, decreased lubrication during sexual intercourse, difficulties in reaching orgasm or anorgasmia, altered sexual sensitivity, abnormal experiences of sexuality. Obstetric, difficulties during labor, dilatation, prolonged labor, obstetric, tears, cesarean sections, episiotomies, postpartum hemorrhages, tears, fistulas, long hospital stays for maternity, fetal distress, early neonatal death, resuscitation of the newborn during labor. Reproductive consequences. Infertility, mental health, post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety disorders, depression, feelings of humiliation, shame, night terrors, among others. Abnormal scarring, keloids, dermoid cysts, neuromas, fibrosis, etc. Problems. A culture that does not practice FGM does not know about it, and when it does recognize it, condemns and criminalizes it. Uncertainty regarding its legal administrative stability in Spain. Conflicts of loyalty with their elders, with the elders who hold power in their countries of origin and who legitimize the tradition. The perception that addressing FGM is not a priority because it is more important to address problems that have to do with work, residence, the law, housing, gender-based violence, and bullying. However, women's health is indeed a priority and a fundamental right. The existence of symbolic violence spread by the media through images and words. The existence of other myths. The myth of return, which has a direct impact on the process of socialization of children as well as on building an ethnic and gender identity. Opportunities. Freedom from the pressure of a community that imposes practices such as FGM, being free to make decisions about the future and the health of girls, being role models for those who remain in Africa, with whom they continue to be in touch and share knowledge and experiences, being role models for other immigrant women in the country where they are currently living. Specific resources and attention services. LATE Asturias. Phone number 984-089276. Attention for African women who are victims of violence. Information and orientation on social services and resources. Social support and different resources. Translation service if necessary. 016. Gender-based violence information and legal counsel. This phone call will not appear in your telephone bill. Free of charge and professional service. Attention 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Referral of emergency calls to 112. Information on resources and rights of victims in terms of employment, social services, financial aid, information resources, assistance and shelter for victims of this type of violence. 112. Emergency situations. Both 016 and 112 are free and allow you to call from a cell phone with no cost or from a cabin without the need to use coins. Women's Counseling Centers. Information and free legal counsel. They act as case managers and monitor the measures implemented by the administration aimed at supporting, sheltering, and the full recovery of victims. Regional network of shelters. Shelter, emergency, support, reception, and recovery. Intervention is carried out both in residential and outpatient setting. Access with children. Crisis centers for victims of sexual assault. 677-985-985. Calls, text messages, and WhatsApp. Email centrodecrisis@asturias.org. Attention 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Psychosocial care services. Offers psychological support to women who are victims of gender-based violence, not in shelters, and need professional help to break the cycle of violence. Access via primary health centers, city social services centers, or gender-based violence victim centers. Women's Counseling Centers. You will always get a friendly support from LATE Asturias in order to get help and support to flee a situation of violence. You can always count on us.